This actually brings up an interesting point about Mayo Zambada's plea deal with the United States. It is true that part of a plea agreement, Mayo Zambada did not state directly that he would cooperate with U.S. law enforcement, and that in his guilty plea, he did admit of being one of the most powerful drug lords in Mexico, responsible for smuggling drugs into the United States and for corrupting government officials in Mexico and able to do these types of operations. But the plea deal that Mayo Zambada signed did not indicate that he was going to cooperate with U.S. law enforcement agencies or federal prosecutors, which is different than the one that Ovidio Guzman signed with U.S. prosecutors, in which he implicitly agreed that he was going to provide information and intelligence to the U.S. as part of the agreement. To be blunt, I can't necessarily confirm if that's really the case, and if Mayo Zambada really hasn't cooperated at all or talked at all with U.S. law enforcement or U.S. authorities. It seems hard to believe that Mayo Zambada hasn't shared anything of value to U.S. prosecutors. But it is also important to note that Mayo Zambada is basically the top cartel leader that the United States has captured in Mexico. There's nobody really even on top of Mayo Zambada. And something important to highlight, in a previous video, I alluded to Mayo Zambada basically being El Chapo's right-hand man, and I'll admit I misspoke. Mayo Zambada was the top cartel leader, and I've said this in multiple interviews, that Mayo Zambada was the most powerful drug lord in Mexican history, much more powerful than El Chapo, even though in many ways he is portrayed as being the right-hand man of El Chapo. Simply put, I do believe Mayo Zambada is sharing information with U.S. authorities, but that they're not publicly admitting to that. And Mayo Zambada's lawyers has released multiple statements that may make things a little bit hard to believe. For example, one of the things that Mayo Zambada has said is that he wants the Sinaloa cartel civil war to end and to peace to return, although his son, Mayito Flaco, has shown no interest of entering into any type of ceasefire or peace agreement with Los Chapitos, and if anything, is doubling and tripling down on his offensive in Sinaloa. Mayo Zambada's lawyer obviously is trying to protect his client, and maybe the United States didn't get as much information they wanted to, but to say that he's not cooperating at all seems a stretch of the imagination.